For my entire life, I've been fascinated with improvisation, with bricolage, with expedient materials, effectively MacGyvering. Anything that involves using what's around you to solve a problem. And that's what this video is about. The goal of this video is to show you some materials that you may not have thought could be good lock picks or could be used to pick locks, but just to open your mind a little bit to things that have helped me either make lock picks or pick locks out in the field. So one of the first things that a lot of people will have in their home is some kind of scraper. And these are scrapers for, this is for sheetrock putty, and I think this is just a general purpose scraper. But they're a thin spring steel. They're rather inexpensive. These are $2 or $3 at a home improvement store. And they're basically just ready to go raw material that you can make into picks or tension wrenches. And the best way to process this material is to use a sander, a grinder, or an angle grinder with a cutting wheel to cut sections out of this. If you try to cut this with like an aircraft tin snip or something like that, it'll just, this metal is hard enough that it will damage the blades. So this is the sort of thing you want to cut with an abrasive disc or a Dremel tool or something like that. But these are two things that you might have around or might be able to find around easily that cost very little money, that are a good source of the right type of metal. Interestingly, a lot of these taper as they get further down. So you have a very springy part at the top and you have a thicker part at the bottom. And you can do some interesting things with that in terms of tension wrenches or in terms of picks. Another source of material to improvise with is actually art supplies. And art supply stores have lots of tools like these. These are spatulas for painting, and they're made to mix paint like this, but they happen to be the right kind of spring steel and also a convenient size where you're not cutting down so much material. This one, as you can see, is actually formed from a thicker rod of material, but it again has the right sort of springy feel. Now, something that's commonly known in the lock sport community are feeler gauges. These are feeler gauges, and you can get these at automotive stores, at tool stores like Harbor Freight or Home Depot or Lowe's, and also out of machinist supply catalogs. They're available in a number of different ways because they're sort of universally useful. I would say for the average person, an auto parts store would be the best place to get this. One neat thing about them is that they're actually labeled with their thickness. So if you find a thickness that works particularly well for you, then you know what size stock to buy if you want to buy sheet material from, say, McMaster Carr or other places like that in the future. So these are really great. These are also inexpensive, somewhere between $3 and $5 for a set like this. Every single piece is a different thickness. Every single piece is labeled. And it's actually fairly simple to make tools like this tension wrench from them. And what you can see here is that I just took a grinder and I ground this area here, and then I ground a flat here. And this has turned out to be a tension wrench that I use quite a bit. It has just the right spring feel for locks that are dirty and messed up. All right, now I guess I should also say with feeler gauges that, you know, there's no mystery to that, but to get them apart, you just take that screw out, and now you have all these free pieces of metal. Something I don't see discussed very often, but that I've personally done several times, is to use an Allen wrench as the start of a tension wrench. So you can get these really super duper cheap sets of Allen wrenches, and I just take a hammer and flatten this side and then sand it down until it fits in the keyway. It's not great because there's very little spring, especially in the thicker ones, but in the thinner ones you can get some fairly springy feel, and they're dirt cheap. And you know, it's not an ideal thing, but this video is about improvisation. Another great source of lockpicking metal are saw blades, and I often see people talk about hacksaw blades, which are pretty thick, actually. I don't know how well you can see that, but this is a fairly thick hacksaw blade, and this is just from the local hardware store. But there are also miniature hacksaw blades as well as coping saw blades, and this is about half the thickness of this other blade, and it has a really great spring, and it's easy to work with because it's already pretty close to the size of an ordinary pick. So these mini hacksaw blades are something I got at Harbor Freight Tools. You can get them on Amazon. They're around. They're also sold in jewelry supply stores. So this is a great way to get some inexpensive raw stock for your lockpicking hobby. Another source of spring steel, and there are a lot of varieties of this, are actually rulers. And you can get, sometimes these are called scales or machinist scales, but you can get rulers of different thicknesses and of different qualities for next to nothing. And it's easy to cut these up to the size and length that you want and make picks. A standby in the lockpicking community are windshield wiper blade inserts, and that's what this is made from. So if you actually take the windshield wiper from a car, inside the rubber strip that wipes the windshield, there's a steel reinforcing strip. And this is one of those, and I just bent it with a Leatherman tool to make a tension wrench for locks like these. Now, a source of material I don't see mentioned very often is welding rod. So this is stainless steel welding rod. I believe this is 1/16 of an inch, and you might want to get even more than that. This is a very simple way to play around with making your own tension wrenches and picks as well. Literally all I do is take this welding rod, and you can bend it with a Leatherman tool or any other needle nose pliers sort of thing. You can see, just make any shape you want. If I wanted some kind of, it's easy to cut. If I wanted some kind of finger hold, I could do this. And now I've got a tension wrench, really fast and inexpensive. Just put it in there and twist. Now obviously at this wire diameter, this is only going to work for locks that require light tension, but you can see that it works. Now, another interesting source of high-performance metals are actually reading glasses or glasses frames, and these are things you can often find just broken in the street. The material that glasses are made from varies widely. There are different kinds of steels and nitinols and flexible materials, but generally the temples of glasses have very interesting metal, which you can take apart and bend and form to make picking tools, and these are often something that you can find in your local environment. Reading glasses in particular are very inexpensive and have, you know, a fair amount of this kind of like straight stick of metal in the temples. So that's something to think about if you hadn't already.